we'll be starting the interview now. Today is November 2nd. It's 8:45 in the morning. We're at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Houston, Texas. Camera is operated by Lisa Sueki. Laura Shigemitsu is catalog audio. Russell Nakaishi interviewing. Mr. Jack Wilson is a veteran of the 141st 36th Division, and his lovely wife Judy is observing. Good morning, Mr. Wilson. Thank you for consenting to the interview so quickly and so with short notice. Thank you. Let's start off the interview by, if you can give us your full name, where you were born, and when you were born.
Okay. My name is Jack Wayne Wilson. I was born in Newburgh, Indiana, on January the 3rd, 1924. My mother's name was Sadie Anderson Wilson, and she was a descendant from the Daniel Boone family. My father was Byron Farron Wilson, and he originally came from Kentucky. My dad did, and they moved to Newburgh, Indiana. He started working in coal mines when he was 15 years old. He drove a mule and a cart, and an area he lived in Seabury, Kentucky, the mines shut down. And when he moved to Newburgh, they were just opening up quite a few mines. And that's what Dad did there. He worked in that over the years. And then all at once, he and his dad decided to get in the ice business. Dad had an old Model T truck. It had solid rubber tires on the back of it. And every morning he would go into Evansville, that was 10 miles west of Newburgh, and get a load of ice to sell for the day. And then he'd get back, he'd put it in the ice house, and they had 2 horses and two wagons to deliver in. Dad would take one, and Grandpa would take the other. And one of them would take one end of town, one would take the other. And they would deliver ice all through the day and everything. And then finally, this was a summer job. And then in the winter, they would work in the coal mines. And finally, that played out and everything. And Dad, back during the Depression, Dad did first one thing and then another he could. There just wasn't any work for people to do. And Dad worked on the PWA and WPA for a while. He helped build roads in that area. And he used a mule and a slip scraper to dig and build roads with in that days. I wasn't very old at that time. Like I said, I was born in 24, and this was in the early 30s and all. And it was also the time of prohibition, no booze allowed. Well, like I said, I roamed all over town, Newburgh, as a young boy. I started down, I think I was about 6, 7, 8 years old. I knew everyone, and everyone knew me. And any way I could pick up an extra nickel or dime, I would do it. I got to knowing where all the bootleggers lived in Newburgh. There was about 4 or 5 of them. And when the river would come up and go down, it would leave big driftwood in there. And I would go through the drift racks and dig out whiskey bottles, which the bootleggers needed bad. And they'd give me a nickel piece for these whiskey bottles, and I'd sell them to them. And then one by one, these bootleggers would get picked up, and they'd be in jail. It started out, I think they'd give them 90 days to time, and then second time was about 120 days. It didn't make any difference because nobody had any jobs. They would do it anyhow. I remember one of these bootleggers real well. When you went into his living room, he had a large carpet covering the floor in his living room. And he'd roll that carpet back, and it was a trap door went down underneath it. They had a hole under the floor where he kept his bootleg. Another fella, the summer months there, he raised a big garden down below his house, and he planted tomatoes all over that garden down there and let them run every place. And he kept his booze hid in under the tomato plants. Another one was really a funny one, this guy was. There used to be, there was a beautiful old brick home that had belonged to someone back years before, and they had it kind of deteriorated a little. It had a dance hall connected to one end of it. Well, this fellow kind of brought things back to life during Prohibition. He would have dances there, and he would sell booze until they caught him and put him out of business. And then behind his house, he had a large barn, a nice barn. and he would hold rooster fights in there, which was another illegal back in those days. It was all kinds of stuff like that. Well, I wasn't 8, 9 years old in those days, and my mother just couldn't get over the fact that I was doing all this stuff at my age and everything, but I did. And anyway, I picked me up an extra nickel and dime I did. I caught bluegill fish, sold them to fishermen, which was illegal. You couldn't do that. And this one day, we lived right across from where an old coal mine had been. They had a pond there, and I'd go over there in the morning, and I would fish and catch these little bluegill, and take my wagon with me in a lard can with water, and I'd go down on Water Street where all the fishermen docks were and everything. And I had this one old fellow down there that always bought them from me. His name was Sherm Lance. He was a World War I veteran, and really quite a character. He'd been in jail time and time again for all kinds of stuff. Well, I pulled this wagon up. He was talking to a game warden, and I didn't know game warden from anybody. And like I said, I didn't know this was illegal. And I pulled this wagon up to him there and tell Sherm I had these bluegill for him, you know. And the game warden looked down at me and saw these bluegill and said, "What you got there, son?" I said, "I got some bluegill." "What are you going to do with them?" "I'm going to sell them to Sherm here for fish bait." He said, "Don't you know that's illegal?" Sherm did. He said, "I can't buy them." He said, "That's illegal, Jack." Well, I didn't know it, but I got the drift of it then, you know. And that game warden said, "Have you been selling these to him?" I said, "Oh, no." I said, "I thought maybe he might want them." The game warden knew better, but that was it, you know. And we went on that way. I went all through grade school and high school in Newburgh. And like I said, I was born and raised there, and I knew everybody, and everyone knew me. And after I graduated from high school, they were building a shipyard in Evansville. That was about 10 miles west of us on the Ohio River. They were to build LSTs, landing ship tanks that we used quite a bit in World War II. And so happened that we had a good family friend that had just retired from the Navy as a lieutenant commander. His name was George Martin. And he got the job as lieutenant commander. He came out of service as a lieutenant commander. He got the job as head of the naval inspection for these LSTs. Well, I called him and asked him if he'd help me get a job at the shipyard that I had just graduated from high school. And he said, "Jack, you got a job. He said, just go put your application in." And I did, and within about a week, I got a call, come to the shipyard. Well, at that particular time, they were still building. They weren't ready to build any ships yet. They had this one huge building there that had been completed. It had a beautiful hardwood floor all over it and everything. And I went upstairs there to report in to the superintendent. There was the superintendent, 2 engineers, and myself all up there. And they were in a conference there, the 2 engineers and superintendent, and I went over there and they asked me what I wanted. I said, "Well, I've got a job and I'm supposed to work up here." And this one engineer asked me my name and all, you know, and I asked him, his name was Brown, Richard Brown. His nickname was Rip. And I said, "Rip, what are we going to do up here in this building?" He said, "Well, son, we're going to build ships, LSTs." And I looked down the far end of this building. There was a double door down there, probably 12 foot wide. I looked down there at that door. I looked back. I said, "How big are these ships we're going to build?" He said, 327 foot long. And I don't remember now just how wide they were, you know. I looked back down at them doors, looked at that building. He said, "Something bothering you?" I said, "There sure is." I said, "How in the world are we going to get something like that out of this building?" He laughed and he said, "You don't know much, do you?" And I said, "No, I don't guess I do." And he said, "I'm adopting you. You belong to me." And he said, "Son, we're building patterns for it." And he'd been an engineer for years. He'd been all over the country with his type of work and all. And he kept me with him, and every move he made sure I understood it. We shot the center line, the baseline with a transit, and inscribed it in the wood floor. It was patterns that we were making for this LST. Well, we did this for several months, and it got to the place where they were ready to start construction. And he never had paid me Lossman's wages at that time. At that time, Lossman's wages was $1.25 an hour. That was really a top wage back in those days. At that time, you know, I was getting 80-some cents an hour, and I was only 19 years old at the time. And Rip Brown got on the superintendent, Chardine. He said, "You make Jack he is a Lossman. He needs to be paid Lossman's pay." Well, Sardine said he's just 19 years old, and that was his excuse. And Brown told me, he said, Jack, he said, here shortly I'm being transferred out into the yards where we're going to start building. And he said, I'll have you transferred, and you'll be my number 1 layout man out there, which he did. And I was his layout man all through the winter, and came up about the first week or two in March, and I got my notice from the draft board to go up for examination. I went up, and I was examined and everything, and I passed that. And at that time, you had your choice from the Army, Navy, or Marines. They had 3 different lines to go through, one for Army, Navy, and Marines. And you had your choice. Well, they put me in a line over there in the Navy, and I said, I don't want in the Navy. I said, I want an Army. And this one fellow there that was in charge of this, he said, well, after talking to you and seeing what you have done so far in your life, we figure you'd be more suited for the Navy than anything. I said, not me. I said, I want the Army. I was arguing with this guy, and the fellow that was in charge of the Army line over, he heard it, and he got in the conversation. He said, what's the matter, son? They're giving you a hard time? I said, they sure are. He said, what's the matter? And I said, they want to put me in the Navy, and I don't want in the Navy. He said, what do you want? I said, I want an Army. He said, well, step over here. You're in the Army. He said, tell me, why didn't you want in the Navy? I said, I helped build some Navy ships, and I don't know whether darn things afloat or not. He laughed. He laughed, and then I went on, and I went back to work at the shipyard, and I had 2 weeks to go before I left for the Army, and I told Brown, I said, Rip, I'm going to leave you in 2 weeks. He said, what are you talking about? You're going to leave me? I said, I'm going to the Army. He said, oh, no, you're not going to the Army. He said, I need you here as my layout man. I said, I'm sorry, but I can't do that. I said, fellas I grew up with and all are gone, and I said, this is my country, and I'm going to the Army too. Oh, he got mad as the devil at me. But you know, it wasn't too many weeks after that I was kind of kicking myself in the rear end. I found out what combat was like. But anyhow, I went on in, and I took my basic training at Camp Blanding, Florida, in a brand new division they'd formed down there. And most of them were 18, 19-year-old boys in this thing. And after we completed that and all, I took 13 weeks of training, and then they gave me 12 days home, and I reported back to Camp Robinson, Arkansas, and we have three weeks of advanced training out there. And this was in August, and that ground out there in Arkansas was like concrete. You couldn't hardly scratch it with a shovel. And we had some smart mouth first sergeant there at this thing. He said, everybody's got to dig a hole, foxhole, armpit deep, before they leave this place. First evening after supper, we got out there, and I hit a few licks with that shovel on that thing, and it just bounced off that ground, the same way as a pick, you know, and I put mine back up. And a buddy of mine there from Evansville, he said, Jack, you got to dig that hole. I said, I don't have to dig that hole. He said, oh, yes, you do. Did you hear what that guy said? I said, sure did, but I said, I don't have to. I said, they're not going to shoot me. They're not going to put me in jail. And a dumb bunny like that try to get you digging concrete. I said, I'm not going to do it. I said, when it's time to dig, I'll dig, but I ain't going to dig yet, you know. Well, every evening he worked on that dang hole, and he wasn't making any progress. And after about probably 5 or 6 days, one evening after supper, they called us all out and said, we need 3 volunteers here to go overseas right away as replacements, which we were all going to do anyhow, you know. And I threw my hand up, and this buddy of mine, Arbor Scharnhorst was his name. Arbor grabbed me and said, Jack, put your arm down. Don't do that. And I said, where do you think you're going to go? I said, you're digging your hole. And I said, they'll leave you here till you finish your hole probably. And he kind of grinned and ended up, and after the war, I talked to him. He said, you were right. He said, it wasn't long after that. He said, I did dig that dang hole. And he said, here, I ended up over here just about 2 weeks behind you. But he was in a different outfit than I was. But I was assigned to 36th Division. And my first encounter with that was, I guess, our E Company in our 2nd Battalion had just captured a hill called Mount Lungo. And the Italians had wanted to capture that. At that time, the Italians had switched over from being with Hitler. They wanted to help us, you know. And they had a unit there, an Italian unit that wanted to capture it. So they let them do it. Well, it was a mess after that. I got there right after this happened and all, you know, and it ended up, the Germans slaughtered these Italians up there. And they had equipment and stuff laying all over that hill. And another fellow now decided to walk up there and see what we could see on this hill. It wasn't a very big hill, but it was really nasty. And there was hand grenades, Italian hand grenades laying every place up there. And they were just looked like a chicken egg, about the same size as a large chicken egg. There was no information on them or anything, just a plain metal egg. And I asked this fellow about it. I said, how do they detonate those things? Well, they said they hit them on their helmet. Said they had to hit them real hard, and then 5 seconds after they hit them, they would it would go off, you know. But evidently they didn't hit them on the helmet too hard because they were laying every place up there. And we call them peacock soldiers because their metal helmets, they had feathers. They looked like parade ground stuff, and they went in combat with stuff like that. And those metal helmets were laying every place up there. And like I said, the Germans really slaughtered them. And E Company, out of our regiment, took the hill for them there, you know. We lost a lot of our boys doing that too because that hill was heavily defended. And years later, we went back over there and we went to Mount Longo. And the Italians had decided to build a museum. They have a museum right at the foot of the hill there at Mount Longo. And it had a lot of this old equipment and everything in it and everything. Well, from Mount Longo, they put me on as a number 2 gunner on a 30 caliber water-cooled machine gun. It was the same gun that was used in World War I. It was a heavy gun, but it was a good gun, very effective. And the German machine gun comparable to that shot about twice as many rounds per minute as ours, but ours was accurate. Anyhow, we went on, and it was in several different encounters. We got to Rapido River. We got to Rapido River. That was really a nasty thing. And we tried crossing this at night on a footbridge. The engineers built a footbridge. And most of the boys that got across over didn't get back from it because this river was flooded. The Germans had knocked it out the dam wherever up above there someplace and flooded it, and the banks were straight up and down, and the water was real swift and cold. And if you just couldn't navigate yourself in it. Anyhow, the next night they said the engineers brought up some wooden barges we was going to use for this to get across. Well, that was the same thing. They got down to the water's edge, and the Germans threw a heavy artillery and mortar barrage in and tore up the barges, and we had to get back up the hill. But then I was the number 1 gunner then. They'd made me number 1 gunner. And this was dark yet. And they said we had to get back up on the hill quick because they were expecting a strong German counterattack on this thing. And the Germans had mined this area real heavy, but our engineers had went down there under smoke cover and made a path through this minefield. And they had it marked where the path was. Well, the Germans that night threw a heavy barrage in around that thing, and the markings were all gone from this minefield, and we had to go through this minefield. And I was carrying this 51-pound machine gun tripod at that time, and every step I took, I thought, well, I'm going to step on one of these mines that are in here someplace. And I was probably about halfway through where it was at, and all at once someone grabbed me by both legs and held on tight and said, please help me, please help me. I looked down, it was one of our boys that had stepped on a mine, and both of his legs were mangled. His eyes were running down his face, and he just couldn't go. Well, he was holding me tight, and my lieutenant was back behind me hollering, Jack, get back up on that hill and set that gun in. You got to get it in. Well, I finally was able to shake him off of me and get up there and set my gun up. For years, this bothered me. I would wake up at night seeing stuff like that. And it was really a terrible thing, and I often wondered about that boy, if anybody ever helped him or died or what happened to him. But anyhow, I got back up there on that hill, and I set the machine gun up. And the day before that, the lieutenant had told us to zero our guns in at one particular spot directly across the Rapido River at the edge of this town of San Angelo, where they expected some of the German masses to come through up there, you know. And we'd put aim stakes up that where we could do this at night and all, you know. Well, about the time we got up there and got our guns set up and everything established and all, some of our people had got across that river, and they had one patrol was up there close to this town of Saint Ame that was pinned down by 2 German machine guns. And the lieutenant told me, hollered at me, he said, "Jack, start shooting. Use your aim sticks and start shooting up in that area there." Well, immediately after I started shooting, these 2 machine guns I don't know whether the same one or 2 more started shooting back at us. And they really covered our area heavy with machine gun fire. The Germans, they had good guns, but the barrels burned out on theirs a lot. Because, like I said, they shot around. Our gun was around, I think around 300 to 450 maybe rounds per minute, and the Germans were quite a bit more than that and everything, you know. But they just covered our area, and a lot of guys got to hollering and got down the bottom of the foxhole, "You're gonna get us killed." Or I was done the shooting up there, and the lieutenant kept telling me, he said, "Jack, don't quit, keep shooting." And I did. I ran, I don't know, my God, how many boxes of ammunition through that gun. And finally, on the radio, he got a radio message that this patrol that was pinned down up there had got out, you know. And he said, "They're out there now, you can let up on it," and I did. Well, the next day after this, that attempted night crossing, General Mark Clark said, "Well, you failed 2 nights attempting to cross the river. You can't do it. You're going to cross in the daytime tomorrow." Well, we knew good and well that if we couldn't make it at night, we sure couldn't do it in daytime. And I heard several different guys off the side say, "I hope that SB comes up here because I want to take a shot at him." And somebody would have done it. But our General Walker said, "I will not send my men across that river anymore," and he absolutely refused to send us. And within a short while, he was relieved of his command, sent back to the States, and he was commander of Benning, Georgia then. He was a fine person. Well, we left there and we went to a valley. We had to leave at night to do this because the Germans were all up above us and everything. We call it Purple Heart Valley. And we dug holes in there, and we had to have them done by daylight. And you had to be careful. If you stick your head out of your hole in daylight, the sniper would get you. Well, we were there several different nights with that thing, and all at once they said, "We're going to Cassino," which we did. We went to the town of Cassino, and the town of Cassino itself had been captured. I think probably the 34th Division had done that, and then they were up on the hill from that. Well, anyhow, we were there for about a day and a half, maybe 2 days, and we were dug in around an old cemetery there. It had a large stone wall around it. And like young boys, got to mess around. A buddy of mine and I decided we were going to go in that cemetery and look at things. And we did. We were walking around through the cemetery, and they had glass fronts on the wall, a lot of these. And there was these dried up bodies in there. And we were looking at all this, and all at once somebody said, "Hey, don't take another step." And we looked over. There was one of our tank destroyers parked right up against the wall, and the fellow had climbed up on his tank, and he looked in there and saw us. And he said, "Don't you know that place is mined?" Oh, we never thought about being mined. He got to point, and he said, see that string over that wire?" He said, "You trip that?" And he said, "You're gone." And boy, you talk about a couple of guys being scared. We were every step we made. I mean, we looked real good before we laid our foot down. And we learned a lesson on that, not to be nosy with stuff like that, because the Germans are bad about mining everything, you know. They'd even sometimes mine their dead. Maybe a German soldier laying someplace with a nice German Luger pistol on, just enough that you could see he had one, where you'd have to roll him over to get his pistol off of him, and boom, there you go. The guy that rolled him over was blowed up. They do that type of stuff and everything, you know. Well, anyhow, that next day then they said, well, we were going up on the mountain up there of Monte Cassino and relieve the 34th Division. And I thought, how are we going to relieve anybody? Because we had lost our rifle companies. Some of them were down to 20-some, 30-some people's all they had left because we had lost so many. But before we left, they managed to declare a peace with the Germans to go across and pick up our dead and wounded. And the Germans helped do that. And that was such a terrible thing to see. Our trucks came down there and they threw these bodies in there like you would old fence posts. And 2.5-ton trucks would come by, loaded down with the bodies just pitched on there because they didn't have much time to do it. And these guys were already dead. But it was a horrible sight to see this. But anyhow, we went on up there and we started going up this mountain. And I was carrying this machine gun tripod at the time, which I said weighed 51 pounds. And I had other gear on me too and all. And when we got up to the top of the mountain where we were going to go, my arms went to sleep on me from carrying this thing. They had to lift the tripod off my shoulder. I couldn't get it off. And I was told to set my gun up and cover this one draw where they expected attack to come through, you know, and other guys in other places do it. Well, this was all solid rock up there. You couldn't dig a hole. And I got to looking around for a place where I could find a good position. I saw a shelf sticking out, and I went over and looked at that, and I could get my gun under that edge of that and cover this draw real good. But I didn't have any protection in front of the gun. And I told my buddy at that time, his name was Ernest Smeltzer, I said, Ernie, you stay down here on the gun, and I said, I'm going to get up here above you and roll rocks down to you. And I did. I got up there. I was rolling rocks down. He was putting them all around our gun and everything in front of this thing. And all at once, a mortar barrage came in, and concussion. Between the concussion and loose rocks I was standing on, I lost my balance and I fell off of this thing. And it hurt my back. My back was hurting bad. And next day I couldn't hardly go. And I told the lieutenant about it. I said, my back is hurt real bad. He said, well, Jack, go on down to aid station with it. Can you walk? I said, yeah, I can hobble down there. He said, well, go down there. And I had a Tommy gun, and I'd picked up there when we got up there and had it in with us, and I wanted the gun with me to go with my 45, for I was going down this mountain by myself. And there was combat patrols scattered all around there. Anyhow, I walked down that aid station, had this Tommy gun on my shoulder, and started to go in there, and one of the fellows worked there. He said, stop, don't come in here, don't bring that thing in here. Give me that Tommy gun. I said, I'm not giving you that Tommy gun. I said, that's mine, and I don't intend to give you to anybody else. He said, what are you doing down here? And I told him about what happened to me. He said, well, where are you bleeding? I said, I'm not bleeding any place. I said, my back just ended. Get back up on that mountain, and next time when you're bleeding, come on down here like that. You're a smart mouth bird. About that time, the phone rang over there, and he talked to it. He said, where are you located? Where's your outfit located? And I told him. He said, well, this call just came from that area in there. And he said, there's been a strong mortar barrage in there on them, and you got several boys wounded. And he said, we're sending litter bearers up there, and said, you take them up. Well, I had no choice. I hobbled up there with these boys. They all had armbands on, and I didn't. I had the Tommy gun on my shoulder. We got up there. I more or less helped them a little, picking out the wounded and everything, And here come another mortar barrage. I don't know whether it was because I had the Tommy gun and with the Red Cross, or whether they just didn't care. But anyhow, this time I got wounded. I was wounded in the right leg above my knee. What we always called $1 million wound. It wasn't nothing real serious, but enough to get you out of it, And after they cleared it up and everything, I was one of the casualties going to go down with them. And I was having trouble walking, and they hadn't enough guys to carry as far as that goes. And somebody said, well, yesterday they brought supplies up here by muleback and said, we think some of those mules might still be just around the corner here. And some of the fellows went over and they got a couple of mules and brought them over. Well, they put me on a mule, and that mule stiffened up, and I just slid right down his neck. Put me on the second time and did it, and I said, that's it. I'm not. I had another fellow there. He was wounded in the rear end, and he said, well, I can't get on a mule anyhow with this wound in my behind. And these guys were a little down anyhow, and he and I helped one another. We hobbled down the mountain together on this thing. And we got down there, that time I was wounded and went in there, and I told the smart mouth guys, I said, well, I'm bleeding this time, you know. And they put, what was it? I can't remember anymore. They put the medication, I already put medication on myself. We carried some, you know, can't remember what we called it anymore. And they took my bandage off and rebandaged and put more of this medication on. And then we were evacuated by ambulance farther back to another place, the 74th Station Hospital, and they did the same thing. This was on the Withdrawal River, the 74th Station was, and they put more on me too. Well, I had kind of a nasty place on that wound. My wound was about like that, and I was lucky it didn't hit the bone or anything, you know, and it wasn't healing up right. And finally one day, one of these nurses' aide was dressing my wound, and they said, Jack, that's really funny that this wound just won't heal up. He said, we might have to do, what did they call it, a transplant? Graft. Might have to do a graft on you. I said, well, how would they do that? He said, what they do, said they'll scrape that around there, and they'll take a place on the back of your leg, scrape skin on it, they'll cross your leg over, and fasten them together, and you lay like that for a few days. And I thought, my God, what a horrible way to get something, you know. Well, anyhow, they called another doctor in there, and they said the doctor right away. He laughed, and they told him about this transplant. And he asked the nurse, he said, give me one of those tongue depressors there he had. He told me, he said, hold on there, man. I had noticed all around that wound, there was like a ridge about that high all around. And he got to scraping in there and scraping this stuff, this medication he put on there. It was too much of it. It caked up like concrete in there. He said, you'd never healed up. Well, he dug all that stuff out and everything, and it was just a short time that did heal up for me, you know. And I had a fellow there that was a ward boy that I got to know real well. He had a brother that was in the 36th Division, and he took good care of me down there because I was on there, you know. And this one day he said, you want to go down and sit on the banks of the river in the morning and throw rocks in the water? I said, I won't do that. He said, I got something for us to drink. I said, you have? Yeah. I was a young boy, I didn't care, you know. Well, he'd got a hold of a bottle of 120 alcohol. Just a small bottle, but that stuff is potent. We sat down there and we sipped on that, and the time we got that drink, and then we had to crawl back up the riverbank. And the doctor got mad over that because we got drunk, and then on top of that, he got me an extra set of clothes, and he said, we'll go to town. Sit right here. After everybody goes to bed at night, we'll go into town. I can't remember the name of this town anymore, but we did, and the MPs brought us back in. And this guy said, well, my wound wasn't quite healed up all the way, but almost. He said, I think you're ready to go back to your own outfit like that. And he sent me back. I reported back to my company commander. It was Hawkins. Bill Hawkins was commander at that time. And he said, Jack, I'd been checking on you. And he said, I was surprised to see you back this soon. He said, how's your leg doing? I said, oh, it's about right. He said, let me see your wound. I had a bandage on. He said, well, hell, you got a bandage on you yet. And he said, why did he send you home? It was quick. I said, oh, I thought it was going to heat up. He got on the phone and he called over there about why they send one of his men back to the bandage. And this guy said, hell, they're going to town. They're getting drunk. The MP's brought them back in. And Hawkins looked at me. He said, why didn't you tell me? I said, you didn't ask me. But anyhow, we used to laugh about that. But we went on with that thing. And it was really something. We had a lot of fun on this thing. At times it wasn't fun at the time. I was trying to think. There was another episode there at one time. Trying to think what that was. Okay, but anyhow, we went on that thing, and it was after the Rapido, and after that, well, anyhow, they made me a buck sergeant at that time, and I was a squad leader instead of a number one gunner on this thing, and we were going pretty good with it and everything. And after we got above Rome, we couldn't catch up with the German army, and they were trying to get on up there on some higher mountains, what it amounted to, you know, and it having trouble contacting them. And machine gun outfit I was in, we were attached to rifle companies. We were always their main support, you know. We'd be right behind them with things they did to help stem counterattacks and stuff. And they had a call one day, I believe it was from Company A. They wanted one squad, is all they wanted. And Lieutenant sent me with my squad. And I reported into this lieutenant in A Company over there, and I asked him, I said, Lieutenant, what do you want with us on this thing? He said, you're going to contact the Germans for me. I said, oh, I am? How am I going to do that? He said, come over and I'll show you. Went over there, and they had a Jeep with the bipod on a light machine gun stuck underneath the windshield, machine gun on. They had another in a post behind the driver and passenger with another gun. And I said, well, what now? He said, you're going to drive down the road till you make contact. I said, boy, that's a good way. We drive down and we get shot at. That's what it amounted to, you know. Well, I told my boys about it, and this one of the fellows is here. It was one of my best soldiers I had. Bobby Camiani is his name. And he's here today too. And he went with me. He stayed on the back gun, and I sat next to the driver on the front one. And we drove down the road probably 5 or 6 miles, and all once I saw a flash and heard a boom, and the water can right beside my leg disappeared. And what it was either a tank or an artillery piece up there. They were expecting another tank to come down the road, and they had armor-piercing shell in it. That's all saved us. Well, before they get a chance to reload the thing, you know, I started in. I knew right where that flash was at, and I started in on my machine gun. And while I was running it, the driver was turning around in the middle of the road. He got turned around, and then my boy in the back, he started in with his gun, and where I was shooting, you know. And we got down the road and around the curve far enough that they didn't get another shot at us. Well, we got on back to this company where Company A we were at, you know, and Lieutenant saw us pull in, and he come over. He said, well, did you make contact? I said, come over here and I'll show you. Right away he walked over. He said, where'd that water can go? I said, it's laying right where your contact's at in the road there, you know. He said, well, I'll be damned. Well, it ended up the Germans made a big counterattack up there at that time. And we stayed with A Company, or did, and they put us out in front of a line of defense because they didn't have that many men up there at that particular time, and this is a strong counterattack coming. We fired off and on all night long, and we found out the next day after that, some of the fellows that had real close contact with them saw these Germans, and they were Oriental troops. And the word got around that Japan had joined in on this, and they were helping us. And I said, well, that's a heck of a note. Well, we found out later that what it was a battalion of Mongolians that the Russians had captured, that the Germans had captured on the Russian front and made them fight for them. And that's what happened. But anyhow, at that particular time, there was orders to withdraw, and they never told us about it. During the night, they thought, well, this is a pretty strong attack to come, and they didn't have that many. And they passed the word to withdraw. Well, we didn't know about it. We fired off and on all night. Every time we'd see a flash, we would shoot into it. We were just about out of ammunition, too. And finally, I told one of my boys, I said, crawl back here and see what's going on. How come nobody else firing? He come back in a minute. He said, Jack, there's nobody here but us. I thought, boy, that's a heck of a note. I said, grab your stuff up, and we're going to get back, too. And we went back toward the rear. And we didn't go very far until we saw a Jeep parked in this one place. I thought, that's funny. A Jeep's up here. Nobody around any place. Walked over there, and there was mortars there, too. The sights were going off the mortars. Word had been given to them to get back in a hurry. And they ran off and left everything, what they did with the rest of them. and we were never told about it. Well, one of my boys, Vincent LaGalla was his name. He was from either Brooklyn or Bronx, New York, and he always talked about him being a taxi cab driver up there. And I said, "You're a taxi cab driver, you drive this Jeep." And we loaded up, there was about 6 of us. We all piled on that Jeep with our gun and everything, and we headed back to the rear. We didn't go too far. We met our company coming back up toward the front. And Bill Hawkins, our commander, was leading him. He was walking ahead of him. And he said, "Jack, where in the world have you all been?" And I told him about it, and I said, "The orders come." He said, "Didn't they tell you to withdraw?" I said, "They never told us anything." And he just shook his head, and he said, "Well, get on back there with the rest of them and leave that Jeep, and somebody else will take care of it, And we stayed with him, went on. I never heard any more about it. But anyhow, they cleaned it out. And Bill Hawkins was wounded bad up there about that time, and he was gone from us for a while and then he came back again. And we went on then from that. We had several encounters after that, but nothing real bad. And we got up to a place called Civitavecchia, and they said it was about 90 miles above Rome, and that was as far as we went. And they said they were going to pull us off the line, and we're going back down around Salerno, get new replacements and new equipment and everything, and do some amphibious training. We're going to be ready for an invasion. Well, back at that time, every so often, so many guys out of the company would get to go on R&R, recreation and rest, And I was one of them, got drawn for that. We went back to Rome, and we went through several different places down there. We were gone for about 4 or 5 days, and then we loaded up, and we went on back down and joined the outfit. And we were down there then, I guess, probably about another week, getting our stuff, taking amphibious training, getting new equipment and everything. And by that time, I knew it was getting pretty close to doing this, but we had no idea where we were going to invade. The rumors were we might go around and go in Greece or someplace like that. We had no idea at all. And one day, my lieutenant, Bob Brickman, asked me, he said, "Jack, what training have you had in high explosive?" I said, "Well, none high explosive." I said, "Other than the hand grenade." I said, "That's the only explosive." He said, "Well, I want you to take some training in that for a day or two." And I said, "Okay." And he took me down there with another group in an old olive orchard. And we blew that olive orchard up. We learned to use about any kind of explosive had, especially Bangalore torpedo. And I never gave it a second thought. I went back, and Brickman asked me, he said, Did they teach you to use it at Bangalore?" I said, "Yeah, sure did. That was what you went in and blew barbed wire up with. You'd be the first one off the barge to do that." And just about a day or two before we loaded up to go on this, I started having fever and chills. Oh, boy, what I got wrong with me. And I went on sick call. The medics had everything packed up, ready to go, And right away they said, "Boy, you've got what fever was it? Malaria. Said, "You got malaria." And they said, "When you hit that beach, you forget about that malaria." And they gave me some pills, and they were right. I did forget about it, and I hit the beach. For I was a number one Bangalore man. Well, we loaded up. We were put on these Higgins boats, the plywood boats, to hit the beach with, and we were sitting row right across from me, and then I was in a row across from them on these things with all our equipment in between us. And we were getting real close to this beach, and all at once I saw the row across from me, about that far above the boy's head, was a row of machine gun bullet holes, and I knew they crossed my head too. And there's a machine gun over there someplace really working us over real good. And about that time, they had the operator that run the motor on Higgins' boat. They had another sailor that stayed up there in front. He dropped the ramp by the time for the ramp to go when you went in. Well, they hit some kind of obstacle, and they did. The guy stopped the boat, and the sailor there, dropped the ramp. When he dropped the ramp, that was the last thing he did. He was worked over real good with machine gun fire, and I had to step over him to get in the water to do this, and machine gun bullets was hitting all around me, and I thought, well, I'll never get into the bank. And I had this Bangalore torpedo in this hand over my head, and my M1 rifle in hand like this going in. And all at once I heard the motor on an airplane. It wasn't no fighter plane, but it was one of these pontoon planes that they launched off destroyers and all. Well, they saw what was going on, and the fellow in behind the cockpit, he had twin 50s back there. And I looked up out of the corner of my eye, he stood up, and he took that machine gun out that was shooting at me there, and the rest of them, with his twin 50s, and I never had another shot fired until I got on in land. And before I got into land, before that guy was knocked out, I felt my hand twitch, and I could feel blood running down my arm, and I thought, oh my goodness, what if he'd hit that torpedo? It would have blown me up and the boys behind me too, And it didn't. And I got up there and I blew the barbed wire and everything. It was fortunate there wasn't any explosive under it, but we all got up there and got scattered on the beach, right? And our medic saw me with that bloody arm and everything. He come running over and he said, Jack, what happened to you? And I told him, he said, oh my goodness. He said, what if Eddie hit that Bangalore? I said, that's right. Well, he wrapped me up and he said, you got another Purple Heart. So that was my second Purple Heart at that time. Well, we went on inland and we got up on the beach, and I was going along there. There was occasionally a sniper would shoot at us someplace up on this hillside, And all at once I was walking along there beside one of the boys, and out of I'm pretty sure that was A Company. We were talking, and somebody hollered at him back behind. He turned around to answer this guy, and when he did, he said, oh, threw his arms up, and he was standing right beside me, and he had a place that big around between his shoulder blades where a sniper had shot him. It was with a wooden bullet, which was strictly against international law. Wooden bullets were, when they hit, they explode. And poor guy was, I don't know, whatever. He had, if he didn't kill him, he bound to have been paralyzed the rest of his life because right in his spine to work with that. One of the other boys said, I think I know where that sniper's at up there, And he said, I'd like to go get him. This lieutenant was up there, and the lieutenant said, go get him. I said, I'll go with you. And another boy said the same thing. And the three of us scattered out, and we start running a zigzag course up the side of this mountain. There was weeds about that high all over that mountain, and we got about two-thirds of the way up there toward where we thought this bird was. All at once he jumped up, Kamerad. Had his rifle laying on the ground. We went up, and I picked up his rifle, and I pulled the bolt back and looked. There was another wooden bullet in it. I showed it to these boys. One of the boys said, what do you think we ought to do with him? I said, I'll tell you what I think we ought to do with him. I said, I'm going to count to 3, and when I say 3, we all 3 shoot him. That's what we did. And I put that wooden bullet in my pocket, and I carried it, got it back home with me and everything. Anyhow, I got back down there, and the lieutenant asked us, said, well, did you get him? I said, yeah, we got him. Well, where is he? He thought he'd be bringing him back as a prisoner, And I reached my pocket, and on this wooden bullet, I said, he's laying back there where this wooden bullet come from. He said, well, I don't blame you. He said, if I'd have been with you, I'd have shot him too. That's the way it was. We went on down the coast a while, and we had snipers fire occasionally. And this one time, a major out of our battalion came up through there, and we had already been told, do not touch anything. There was beautiful villas all along this road going in toward Cairns, and everything was mined in there. And this one time we were going down the road, and I just happened to look back, and one of my boys was reaching up, getting ready to bring a bell up there. I said, hey, take your hands off that thing. He got his hand back. I said, don't you know what they told you about mines? He said, I wasn't thinking. He looked up there, and he said, oh, my God. He said, it is mined. And if he'd rung that bell would have blown up, and no telling how many guys have been killed and wounded from it by there and everything, Well, anyhow, we went on down a little farther, and the first thing you know, we got in a thing where they said there was an island off the coast there that had some coastal guns on it, and the Germans had used that, and they had turned some of the big guns around on it, and they were firing us with these big guns, and they were using phosphorus shells. I mean, that phosphorus hit you. You were hurting bad, because it would burn plumb through you. A piece of it would. You had to have mud or something put on there to smother it out, we got down, there was an old set of railroad tracks down there, and we could see not too far down that track was a tunnel that the trains had to go through, and we ran and got up in this tunnel, and we stayed in there for about 30 or 45 minutes till the shooting stopped. Well, when we came out of there, we were all black as we could be because the trains all were coal-fired over there, and it was soot all in there. For days and days after that, you could tell about as far as you could see one of us who'd been in that tunnel, you know. Well, we got to pushing on inland, and we had a lot of different practices going on and everything. And all at once they come up there and they said they wanted my battalion to be loaded up on trucks and take this one particular area up there. It was Montelimar, what they called it. Said the German 19th Army was trying to make their way up into the Vosges Mountains. Patton's army had broke their line down there to our left. And they sent our battalion up there, and we were going to be scattered along this ridge. There was one of the main highways ran parallel with the Rhone River. Then there was the highway, and then there was this ridge. All three of those things run parallel together. Well, we got up there, and we had to go up there on this hill and find out where to set up some machine guns. And Bob Breckman and I went up there to do this, and I had picked up a shovel, a long-handled shovel, down there. And he said, "What's that for, Jack?" I said, "Well, we're going to dig holes up there for these guns." And I said, "It'd be easy and a lot quicker for the boys digging with it, you know." So I had it in my hand, and we went up on this ridge, and we were looking for a place, and all at once there was a German machine gun on down the line of the place a ways, and we didn't know about, you know. And he fired at us, and we hit the ground. The next burst, I felt that shovel handle quiver in my hand, looked out of the corner of my eye, and the handle was shattered from machine gun bullets. Then there was another burst of gunfire, and I felt the pack on my back quiver. And he said, Breckman said, "Jack, you been hit?" I said, "I guess I am." He said, "Can you move? Are you hurting?" I said, "No." He said, "Can you move your legs?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "We got to get out of here." And he said, "Let's jump up and run to the backside of that ridge." Well, we did before a guy could get another round loose on us, you know, and got to the backside. And he kind of got to laughing. He said, "What color's your blood?" I said, "Now, what color do you think my blood is?" He said, "Take that pack off." I took that pack off, and before we had left, we were all given either you could have 6 cans of beer or 6 cigars. And I took 6 cans of beer, and I'd save 1 can for a special occasion. I had it in my pack. I had clean socks, clean underclothes, and even had a bottle of Vaseline hair tonic in there. Why I'd have carried something like that, I don't know. But that was all perforated, and this was running down my back. And he laughed. We went on down there, and we went around the ridge again and come back, and we found a place there where I could put 2 of my guns, you know, in good position. We went on down there, and I brought 2 guns and squad up there and don't start digging, you know. And we were getting just a few elements from this 19th Army coming through at that time, you know. And some other guys were sniping at them and everything. And time we got dug in good and everything, there were quite a few coming up. The Air Corps was on their tail. They were dive bombing them. Our artillery was shelling the devil out of them. They had horse-drawn stuff and motorized too. It was a horrible mess. And I told my boys, I said, main thing here is try to kill the truck drivers, get them, and that way you help clog things up more, you know. Now we were working them over pretty good there, and just all at once there was a half track pulled off out of the line up there, and it had we had one piece of equipment about like that. They were for anti-aircraft, you know, and they had 4 20 millimeters. Ours did. I don't know whether theirs was 20 or 30 or what, but a big sheet of steel in front of them, you know. And I knew there was nothing we could do with that thing, you know. And they'd clean us out in a hurry. And I hollered at my boys. I said, "Jump off your guns and run as fast as you can to the backside of this hill." Well, we all did. We all ran back over and got on the backside of this hill. And we weren't over there over 5 or 10 minutes, I guess. And the regimental commander come up in that area there, and he said, "Who's in charge of those guns that are not firing over there?" And I said, "I am, sir." "Why aren't they firing?" And I told him why. He said, "A bunch of damn yellow bellies." He turned around, and he went over there, and he got on one of our guns, and he no sooner got opened up, this thing cut loose on him, and he was hit all over by shrapnel from this thing. And I know my company commander and the platoon leader both told me, said, "Jack, you did the right thing." I said, "Well, I know it." I said, "There's a time to fight and there's a time to run." And if you don't have sense enough to know that, how are you going to fight anymore? And he said, well, you sure did the right thing there. Well, we went on with that thing there, and finally it got to be too much for us, you know. And they got on through, and they got up in the edge of Vosges, and there were several towns that we took up there, and they were still up ahead of us, but they left Elm so long, you know.
Let's take a break now. We'll change the tape. Okay.
After Montelimar, we went ahead, and we had several encounters before we really had any big encounter. And we got up around the Moselle River, and it was running swift and cold. This was in about the 1st of October, I'd say, at that time, and the water coming out of the Vosges Mountains and everything. And there was a mayor in one of those little towns up there. I don't remember what town it was, but I know some way or another he'd made contact with us, knew what we were doing, and he knew where there was a place on the Moselle that was shallow. It would be easy for us to cross. And I know at the time they said he was about 80 years old or something like that. Well, that's a kid, because I'm 85 now myself. But anyhow, he took us up there at night, and they got a rope across that thing, and water was just above my waist on that. But it was cold and wet, and we took light machine guns with us on us because we didn't know what we were going to do, you know, at that time, air-cooled guns. And directly across the river from where we crossed was an old barn. And most of the French over there, when they build a barn, it'd be stone on two sides and one end, and the next end, they'd build a house on the end of it. But for some reason or other, there was no house any place around there. It was just that wooden end sticking out on there to the left, that thing. Well, we got up in that old barn, and we were sitting in there all cold and wet, waiting for our next assignment, because they had groups out ahead of us trying to make contact and everything. And all at once, a machine gun up there on this hill got to shooting in there, and he was going in. I was sitting down there close to the wooden end of that thing, and them bullets were hitting those stone walls, and they were ricocheting back and forth in there on us. And I knew sooner or later we were going to be losing some men on it. And like I said, I was wet, I was cold, I was in a foul mood, and somebody trying to do that. And I told the lieutenant, I said, you know, I'd like to see if I can get that bird. I said, put a stop to this. He said, go ahead, Jack. And I grabbed up one of those light machine guns, and one of the boys that was in my section with me at the time, by that time I was a section sergeant, and it was Bobby Camiani, who's here now in a wheelchair. Bobby went with me, and I said, you grab up a box of ammunition, and I'll carry my gun with about 2/3 of a belt in it, you know. We went out the other end of that door. There were just little trees on there, none of them any taller than this ceiling, I guess, just a real brushy hillside. And every so often this bird would shoot up there, you know, and I could pretty well detect where it was at. And every time he would shoot, I would go walk a little more up in that direction. And finally, after about the 3rd go-round, I was pretty sure I knew just exactly where he was at. And I told Bobby, I said, I'm gonna run this belt through this gun right there where I think this thing's at. And I did, and I said, I'm pretty sure I got him. And I said, I'll put that other belt in here. And I put the other belt in that gun. And I said, you come along behind me with your carbine there. And we got up there, and about that time I could see where the gun was at. And there was a dead guy laying there behind it. And I went up and checked him. He was dead, and there was another trail of blood leaving that place. There had been 2 of them, and that other one was wounded too. And he got away. And Bobby said, you going to go after him? I said, well, let well enough alone. I said, I'm going to disable this machine gun. And I did that. I shot into the receiver with my gun, you know. And then he had a aluminum medal on him. I took the medal off, and he had practically a brand new duckbill swastika cap. I got the cap. Then his dog tags hanging out. I jerked his dog tags out, and went on back there. Went back down there, and Lieutenant asked me, "So, well, Jack, did you get him?" I said, "Sure did." I said, "Here's some of his equipment and all, you know." He kind of laughed. He said, "You shouldn't have took that dog tag." I said, "I know I didn't," but I said, "I did it anyhow, and I've still got that stuff at home someplace from it." But anyhow, he said, "You boys will be getting a nice citation out of this." He said, "You'll probably get a Silver Star." And I never thought much more about it. And we went on down and captured some more little towns. We went down there and we captured this one town, Saint Ame, France. And they were expecting a strong counterattack on that. And I had been made platoon sergeant just before we crossed the Moselle River. Our platoon sergeant took a nasty hit from an 88, and they made me platoon sergeant. Anyhow, lieutenant told me, he said, Jack took a couple of those guns and the guys down at the edge of this town and set them up because they were expecting a counterattack to come from that. I did. I had the fellows scattered out behind me on the street going down through there. And I got to the end of this street where I was going to turn. I turned, and when I turned, there was a stone wall probably about 20 foot from me, and there was a big loud bang. There was a German tank up on the hill there, which I didn't know about, and he shot directly at me. And the shell hit that wall, and I wasn't touched. It wasn't a piece of steel hit me any place on my body. But my M1 rifle in my hand, the stock was shattered on it, and I had a pair of binoculars on my rifle belt. In the back it had a hunk of steel in that, and I was knocked out cold. And the boys thought I was dead, and they went on down and set these. We were pretty close to where we wanted to set the guns up anyhow. They went down and set the guns up. Well, I was knocked out for about 10 minutes, and when I came to, my nose was bleeding, my ears was bleeding, and I had a terrible ringing in my head and ached all over. And I hobbled on down there where the boys were and everything. And they said, Jack, we sure thought you were dead. And I said, well, I'm not. So we went through
Can we
that.
take a short?
Okay, now?
Let's go. Continue.
Well, anyhow, next day I was still hurting from this thing. I ached all over, and like I said, I had this terrible ring in my head. And I told the lieutenant, I said, I think I'm going to go on sick call with this thing. See, I said, I may have some bad damage done here someplace. And he said, Jack, if you think you can, he said, wait another day or two and see. He said, we got a real important engagement coming up here, and we were real short on non-coms. We didn't have hardly any non-coms left in our platoon there. And I said, okay, I will. Well, we were attached to A Company again. At that time, we were with A Company a whole lot. And A Company, we were right in the edge of the where we were trapped up in this thing. And A Company went ahead through on the point. The other companies had been trying to break the line at that place, and they couldn't do it. And they sent us up there, and our platoon, our A Company, broke the line there, and we were right with them. And we got probably 5 or 6 miles behind enemy lines, and we realized there was no one else following us. And they got on the radio and found out that the line had been closed, German line had been closed up again. Nobody else could get through. So we dug in more or less a semicircle, half circle, and Lieutenant Brickman and Lieutenant Gordon Nelson at that time, who was my platoon leader at that particular time, he was with me, and I was the platoon sergeant, and we had just half of platoons, all we had with us at that particular time. He told me, he said, you take half the guys and one gun and go down on the left end, and he said, I'll take the other and get on the right end of this thing, which we did. And I got down on that one end down there, and I stayed with one of these boys that I had been platooned with ever since I'd been in there. He was from the hills of Kentucky, Bert McQueen, a good soldier, a fine person. Anyhow, Bert and I stayed together, and we dug a hole for our gun and everything, and we never quit digging all the time. And we got to taking our knives, and we cut tree limbs down and put a top on there and threw dirt on that and everything. Well, they decided then, and found out the shape we were in, that we were real low on all food, ammunition, and medical supplies too. And Gordon Nelson, not Gordon Nelson, but Marty Higgins was our battalion commander at that time. It wasn't a whole battalion, it was elements of a battalion. And the highest ranking officer in there was a first lieutenant. Well, Gordon, Marty Higgins. Why I can't think of that. Marty Higgins was the oldest of them. He had been a soldier. He had been a soldier in the horse-drawn army before World War I, before World War II, and he was the oldest of these commissioned officers in there, and they voted to make him battalion commander. He was the first lieutenant, and he was in charge of us at that time and all. And like I said, he got on the radio, which the batchers were weak on, and radioed back and told about our positions and everything. And we were real low on food, and they decided to send us some D-bars, chocolate D-bars into us. I don't know whether you know what that is or not. It's real hard chocolate, and you gnaw on them like a squirrel. And they put a few D-bars in smoke shells and shot them into us there. Well, they had too high a charge in, and when the shells hit, they blew up, and people were getting hit by pieces of this hard chocolate. And he got a radio call back, said, "Don't do that anymore." Said, "We're taking casualties from D-bars." Well, then they decided to fly over and drop supplies with a parachute. Well, they weren't very big parachutes, and they all hung up in the tops of these big trees. It was big, tall trees, and we couldn't get to them there. They radioed back in and said, we can't get to what you got there. Well, in the meantime, they decided to send a patrol out and try to find a gap in the German lines where we could infiltrate back through again, you know. Well, this patrol, I don't know, it was a pretty big patrol, but none of them ever came back on this thing, so I was told. The next night, they decided to send another patrol. Well, Gardner Nelson sent word down to me. He said, "Jack, I want 3 of your men to go on this patrol." Well, I didn't have but like 6 or 7 is all I had altogether. Well, I had 2 boys there. This one I was in the hole with. Bert McQueen, he was born and raised in this type of country we're in. He was a regular old hillbilly boy and a fine person. I had another fellow by the name of Tillman Warren that way too. I sent those 2, and then I sent Bobby Camiani. Bobby was an old city boy, but he was a fine soldier. And Bobby's here too now. He's in a wheelchair. He had a heart attack not too long ago, but he's doing all right now. But now I sent my 3 on that thing. And I don't know how many more were on this patrol. But they were the only 3 that came back, and they brought a German prisoner with them. And they told me, we argued back and forth among ourselves about whether we ought to shoot him or turn him loose, you know. And said we decided we'd keep him with us because we might be captured before we can get back, and maybe he would help us, you know. Well, they did. They brought him back with them and everything. Well, they didn't decide to do any more of that, and then they got back on that radio, and this time they decided to take fuel tanks, spare fuel tanks from fighter planes, and put supplies in them and dive bomb us with it, which they did. And most of those landed just outside of our perimeter, and some boys had to go out and fight for them. I had to stay in on my gun and keep it covered, for we were still expecting a strong counterattack, you know, from that thing. And we got a few supplies like that. And I think it was about the next day, one of our boys up on the other end there was sitting in his foxhole. Buck Glover was his name. And Buck said he saw somebody coming up toward him there. And he said it was one of the Germans trying to infiltrate up there. He said, I raised my rifle up and started to shoot him. He said, I noticed then he had on an American uniform. He said, I dropped my rifle back down and I thought about it. And he said, well, he had heard before that the Germans pulled that every so often, that they would do that with our uniforms to get in closer to us. And he said, I made up my mind, well, I'm going to shoot him. He said, I raised my gun up that time. He said, I just ready to pull the trigger. This guy threw his hand up and said, hey, you guys need any cigarettes? And it was old Muck who it was. Muck.
Mutt.
Oh, Mutt.
Mac.
Mutt.
Mutt.
He's here. My memory fades me on some of these things sometimes. But he's here too from this thing. He was from Hawaii. And it ended up then that they came on in, they broke the German line. And that was in the Lost Battalion, in that thing for us. And our company commander sent a Jeep up there. He knew that I had took this nasty concussion and didn't know what kind of shape we were in there. He sent a Jeep up there, and Lieutenant and this Bert McQueen and I were in a Jeep going out. And we were going out of this thing, I almost looked up, and there was a newsreel cameraman up there. Had us on a newsreel. And my mother and them back home, they had somebody went to a movie, and they saw this newsreel, and they recognized me on the Jeep, and they told me my brother went to he knew the fellow ran the projector and got that piece of film out, you know. And that picture, we've had that, and that's been around a lot of places. In fact, it's on the front page of my book right now. And I've scattered them around quite a bit, you know, and everything. And from time to time, I've seen different scenes of World War II, stuff be down around the Battle of the Bulge, and I'd see that Jeep that I was in riding down through there, which I wasn't even near the Battle of the Bulge, but they'd take different scenes and things and put it in there like that, you know. And I had different friends around home said, "Hey, Jack, I saw you in the Battle of the Bulge." Saw you someplace else, I wasn't. But that was the end of it for me. When he came out, I had pneumonia, I had trench foot, and I was having a lot of problems with an old leg wound, and they got shipped me on back, and I ended up out Camp Carson, Colorado, and I was discharged the 12th of July, 1945, about 10 days before the war ended in Japan, and that was the end of it for me.
When you were rescued, what was your reaction when you saw the Niseis come up?
Reaction was what?
When you saw the Nisei soldiers coming,
well,
what was your reaction?
See, where I was at down there, I didn't see them. I was covering the other end of this thing down there. There was an old dirt trail that came up, and they came over on the other side of that. And it wasn't long after they were up there that I heard all the commotion, knew what was going on and everything, you know. Yeah, I was real happy when I found out what it was. We knew those boys were up there, and they took a couple towns that we were scheduled to take. Bruyères and Biffontaine, we were scheduled to take them, and they sent the 442 up there about that time, and they took them. That was 2 engagements that we got out of taking, you know. And there were some pretty rough battles there on those things, you know, and everything. But that was the end of it for me after that. And
before the Lost Battalion, had you ever had a chance to meet any of the Nisei soldiers before the Lost Battalion?
Anything what now?
Did you ever meet any of the Nisei soldiers before the Lost Battalion?
Oh, yeah. This one, Mutt Sakamoto, who made the first contact with us, this one I couldn't think of his name, Mutt Sakamoto, he's here. And ended up, he and I was in a convalescent hospital at Camp Carson, Colorado together. And that was my first personal contact with him and all, you know. And he and another fellow, I can't think of his name anymore now, but I'd met them over the years and everything, you know. So,
you need to be going.
But I've been in contact with them over the years and everything, and they made me an honor. I don't know what I told you or not. They made me an honorary member of when they had their 50th reunion in Hawaii. I was invited. And they had probably close to 2,000 people there on Saturday night. When it was about over with, they said, "Well, Jack Wilson, come up to the podium." What the heck do they want me up here for? And I went up there and I said, "What did I do?" And they hung a beautiful medallion around my neck. I said, "What is this?" I said, "This is commemorating our comradeship with you, and we consider you an honorary member of our outfit too." Well, shortly after that, on one of our reunions, one of the 442 boys was there, and he gave me this emblem at theirs. They wear on their bolo. I don't have my bolo on now. I took it off. And I said, "I'll put this on with mine. I'll wear them both." I said, "I'm a member of the 36, post member of that, and also the 442. He'd made me a member. And I've worn it ever since then. And I've had different ones ask me at the time, said, "Were you with 442? I said, "No, I'm an honorary member of it, you know."
You were rescued by them.
That's right. They're a fine bunch of people. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for those boys. It wouldn't. We found out because, like I said, this German 19th Army, they knew who we were, and we knew who they were. And they knew that we were the main ones that tore them up so bad at Montelimar. And here we were up there, we were the ones that broke through the line they had up in the Bulge, and they had been given orders not to take any of us prisoner. We found that out several years later, that some German officer had told them that they'd had the word not to take any of us prisoner. So we wouldn't have been here.
While you were in Italy, did you fighting in Italy? Did you hear about the 442nd when you were in Italy?
No, I didn't. I found out later, I didn't know at the time, that the 100th Battalion, who was the first ones over there, and the 100th Battalion was involved up there in Monte Cassino some. But I spent just a very few days up there, and I think I was told that after they bombed it, that was the day, I was wounded the day before it was bombed. And I was told that after it was bombed, I think about 10 days later, they took our whole outfit off of there, because shouldn't have been up there to start with, because we didn't have that many people, you know. And I didn't know, and they were pulled off the line. They were back off the line for a long time, and I was off for a long time with my wound. And really, I never missed about 2 weeks combat with my outfit, because they were getting regrouped and everything. We needed new replacements, new equipment and everything. And about the time I come out of the hospital, they were ready to go again. And they made me, at that time, they made me a staff sergeant, and I was section sergeant from the thing and all this and all.
You received at least 2 Purple Hearts. Did you receive any more?
Well, I could have had 4 Purple Hearts for one of them. The Germans drew blood on me 4 different times, but I was given 3. My discharge only shows 2, but I was given 3 different ones. And I didn't get my records were all lost, military logs. When I got in the hospital, I wrote to my mother and my girlfriend, whom I married later on after I got home, and told them I was in the hospital, but I was all right. Well, shortly after that, I got letters from both of them, and they said they were really glad that they had heard from me, because they had both just written to me, and their letters came back to them stamped missing in action, and they thought I was missing in action. But shortly after that, they got my letter and told them that I was in the hospital and all. And it took me years to get this straightened out about my missing action stuff and everything. And some of it's still not straightened out as far as that goes. They kept telling me they had no records on different things, which they didn't on medical. Like this hearing thing, they said no record on it. Well, I found out they had a fire in a place in St. Louis that burned up a bunch of stuff like that. I don't know whether that's where it happened or where it did, you know. But I never got my tech sergeant stripes on my discharge, or I didn't get my other Purple Heart stuff on there. And I was supposed to have a Silver Star from that gun I took out up there on the Moselle, and that wasn't on there. So, I don't know. I did get one. I did get a Bronze Star. I got a Bronze Star out of that thing up there on Rapido River. I got that. And then here about 3 years ago, I was awarded the French Medal of Honor. I've got that. And other than that, there's a lot of stuff that I should have had that I didn't get, you know, wasn't on there. Of course, I didn't care that much about it. I was glad to get out of the place.
You mentioned earlier that you go to schools and talk to the children, and you wrote a book. What kind of things do you tell the young children?
What kind of what?
When you go to those schools to talk to the children, what do you tell them? Oh, they come. Oh, when the children come to talk to you about your war experience, what do you tell them?
Well, I told them different stories, things that happened to me and all. And before that, I had no desire to write a book or get involved in anything like. I wanted to forget about it. I wanted to just forget about it, because I had a lot of bad nightmares from some of this stuff and everything. And like I said, this little town that I was born and raised up in down there, I knew everybody and everybody knew me. And these kids had projects in high school, and they had to find out something about World War II, and they said, well, contact Jack Wilson. Everybody knew me, knew where it was at, but they knew that picture. It was on the newsreel and everything, you know. And I couldn't refuse kids to do something like that. And I got to thinking that I interviewed about 3, maybe 4 different times for it over the years. And I thought, Bill Hawkins, my company commander, he was on me all the time too. He said, Jack, you got to write a book. You got to write a book. He had kept a diary since he was 9 years old, and as a commissioned officer, he could keep records on stuff like this in combat, and he did all this. And he had a book that thick like that. He ended up giving it to me, but with the understanding that I wouldn't let it leave my house. If anybody wanted to see it, they'd come to my house to look at it. He had a copyright on it and all, and he had several people who wanted to get a hold of it and publish it and all, and he didn't want to do that. And he said, what my kids do with it when I'm gone, he said, don't make any difference. Well, he's gone now. He finally checked out there a couple 3 years ago, I guess. He was having a lot of trouble. When you'd go to see him, I used to go to see him down in Florida in the winter. And I spent a little time with him, and also Marty Higgins. I'd go spend a little time with Marty. And they're both gone now. And Bill got to the place, 9 o'clock at night, he'd say, excuse me, I got to do something. He'd go right down briefly some of the things that happened for the day to be in his diary. And his hands were getting real bad like that. And this one reunion I saw him at, he said, Jack, I'm going to have head surgery. I said, head surgery? He said, yeah, they're going to take this out of me. Well, the next reunion, I believe it was after that, he had this head surgery. And his son had him there. I think we were at that reunion in North Carolina, weren't we? Virginia?
Williamsburg.
Anyhow, he was there, and he was bald-headed by then. And on top of his head, he had a place about that big around. I could see a piece of plastic in up there, you know. And he said, look at me. He said, my hand is steady as it can be now. And he died less than a year after that. Didn't do him much good.
You have the opportunity with this videotape to talk to future generations.
What's this?
You have a chance to give the future generations a message.
Yeah.
What would you like to tell the future generations about what you did in the war?
I don't know what. Really, I don't guess I'm understanding.
Any message?
I do know that if people like me don't tell them, that the future won't know, you know. A lot of people could dream up a bunch of this stuff and they'll tell it's not true, you know. And that's real sad. I've had some experience with some of my stuff with one bird like that. It had me pretty upset there for a while over this thing, and I thought, that's the kind of guys that messes us up and everything. And the same person that had messed some of my stuff up had also told that he was on a patrol when the war was just practically over. One of the big generals in the German army had contacted him and said he wanted to surrender to send a group to get him. And it was our group that went. I think they sent an armored vehicle and about two dozen soldiers. Well, end up a good friend of mine was in that. His name was Delmer Knecht. And Delmer knew all about him and knew everybody that was on this thing. And this bird comes up, and he said he was involved in this, and said he even had the general's pistol. Oh, Delmer was so mad. He'd about like me. He wanted to knock him in the damn head for telling such stuff as that. And I said, that was the kind of people that mess this stuff up, you know. And like I said, I've never, in my book, there's a lot of names I've left out because I'm not just sure sometimes. It's been too many years. I don't want to put a name in there that wasn't right. I put one thing in my book that wasn't right. It wasn't that serious, but I said I did it. I was told at the time that peace was declared on the Rapido River to pick up the dead, that a fellow by the name of Karl Strom spoke fluent German, and that he did this. Now, somebody had told us that, and that was a word that was going around down there. Well, that stayed with me over the years, and when I wrote my book, I put that in there, you know, about the Rapido River. And after that, Carl got a hold of one of my books, and he told me, he kind of laughed. He said, Jack, he said, I was involved in it, but he said, I never think of making peace on it. He said, I can't speak German either. I said, now, Carl, I said, I'm sorry, but I said, that was the story that I had heard, you know, like I said. That's how this stuff gets started. One guy would tell one thing about 6 or something, and then the next guy, it'll be 16, then the next guy, 106. And you just don't know. And that's how stuff gets out of whack with it, you know. And I don't want to see that happen myself if it possibly can. And I'm always glad to do this, help with these things with what I can do, but it's just getting harder for me all the time because this hearing, I can't get it out. I hear but I don't understand, you know. And the VA tells me that they can't do any more for me with hearing aids, I hear people and all playing, but I can't detect what they say. And he said, there's nothing, I have a mold in there that was destroyed by this tank that did that, and there's nothing that can be done about that, what they tell me,
Can you tell us about your family?
My family?
Your wife and children.
Well, my first wife and I, we went together. We went together when we were seniors in high school, and she was really a loving person. And when I left to go to service, she told me she'd wait for me to come back, which she did. And she put up with me for about a year or more before we got married. Because when I first came out, I guess I had a lot of catching up to do. I was doing a lot of wild running and everything, and all my buddies would come back I was one of the first discharges in my area, Well, the war wasn't quite over. And we'd have to go out and have to celebrate stuff we'd missed over the years, And she put up with me there for a while, and finally we got married. And before that, I calmed down from that stuff. I thought, well, I've got to do something, I was getting $20 a week unemployment stuff. We called it 5220. We'd get that for a year at that time. And $20 back then did go a long way. You could buy a beer for 10 cents. But anyhow, we were out celebrating a whole lot, and finally I decided it's time to put a stop to this. And I had heard about a school in Chicago on air conditioning and refrigeration, which was really beginning to boom good, especially air conditioning. And I went to school up there for about 7 months, got my diploma on it. I went all around the area, the place that was starting this, tried to get a job. I had my diploma in one hand, and they'd all ask me, said, well, how much practical experience have you had? I said, well, none yet. They said, well, you get a little practical experience, come back and we'll hire you. And this went on for, probably 2-3 months, something like that. Well, like I said, I knew everybody in the town of Newburgh, and everybody knew me, and they knew about some of my problems and all. And the postmaster there knew me real well, and one day he called me. He said, Jack, have you got a job yet? Jimmy Cox is his name. I said, no, I haven't, Jimmy. He said, well, you got one now. Come to work for me at the post office. And I went in there, and he needed a clerk. He made a clerk out of me, and this was a part-time substitute thing. And it wasn't part-time, it was full-time. And it wasn't long when they made a permanent clerk out of me. I had to take a test, and I got the appointment. I was permanent clerk. And I was a permanent clerk there for about almost 5 years. And the town was growing, and they needed another rural route. And I wanted a rural route. I didn't like inside work. And I tried to get him to transfer me, and he wouldn't do it. He said, no, I've been 5 years making a clerk out of you, and we need you for a clerk. And I said, well, I don't want to be a clerk. And so I took examination, and I got the job as rural carrier. And I finished out my life as a rural mail carrier, and I've been retired now 30 years. I retired the day I was 55. I had, with my Army time and all, I had 30 years in with the post office. That counted all the civil service, And they made me work that day. They said, you're not 55 to midnight. When I came into work that morning, 6 o'clock, they had a record player going. And I thought, what the heck is this? And it was this song, Take This Job and Shove It. And I've kept busy all my life after that, though. I've been busy. I built my own home. I was 3 years building it. Back at this time, there was a lot of other fellows just like me, just married, just home service, and we were building homes for ourselves, and I was 3 years building mine. And I always had 2 jobs or more going and everything, And I've kept busy all my life. I've enjoyed working. And my wife came down with cancer. We had 3 children, and she came down with cancer in her breast. And they removed one breast, and then first thing you know, they had to remove the other. And they'd always tell her, said, if you can go 5 years without any more recurrence, you got a good chance. Well, she'd go about 5 years, and it would pop up again, And she fought it for about 20 years and died. And then I'd known Judy all my life, too. And after that, Judy and I got married, and we've had an enjoyable life together. Judy enjoys going with me in these things, and she knows about as many people as I do.
Have you told your children about your wartime experience?
Well, they know something about it. Yeah, I've told them about it. And of course, they had my book. They read my book and all. And my girls usually not too interested in stuff like that, but I've told others in the family about it and all and everything, you know. And like I said, I was awarded this French Medal of Honor here about 3 years ago. And my American Legion post, I was the first World War II member to join my American Legion post. And I've been real active in that over the years. I'm a 65-year member of that. And they gave me one of their highest award for that, right after I got the French Legion honor medal, you know. And I was interviewed several times on that, local papers and all. And one of the county papers down there had a full front page ad on my experience with that, getting that and everything, and quite a bit of honor involved in all that and everything, you know. So I've got a lot of stuff at home commemorating this stuff and everything I've been through, and I'll put it up and everything, you know. I thought, well, somebody can have it one of these days. And I've been back over. I took my first wife over 2 different times. I took Judy same place, and she and I went back over again here a couple of months ago. And I went through France, not France, but Italy again and all that and everything, you know. So I know there's not going to be much more of it. She's 19 years younger than me, and she likes to drive, and we drive to most of these that we can. We went to one in the spring at San Antonio, which we really liked going to San Antonio. And then we went to one in Omaha, Nebraska here just a few weeks ago. Woke up on a Saturday morning ready to go home, looked out the window, and the ground was white. It was snowing. So it's been first one thing and another, but it's kept us busy with it and all, you know. So we go down to my American Legion post every Friday night, and we're with friends down there and everything and all, you know. And I was commander back in those years, and commander in 1951. The first time when I first joined the Captain post down there, I went to one of the meetings. It was all World War I guys, you know. And they had 3 brothers that were members of that World War I, Harold, Oscar, and Louis Breezes. Well, this big old building we had there, for heat, they had an old coal burning stove with a pipe sticking out the window, and this was in July. During that meeting, one of the Breezes boys got up and said, I make a motion, we take our stove down for the summer. One of the other Breezes boys got up and said, now if we do, we got to put it back in the fall. They chewed this thing back and forth for 30 minutes, and I thought, what kind of an outfit have I joined here, you know? A 20-year-old guy and a bunch of stuff like that. Well, I never came to a meeting for quite a while after that. And one day, this fellow, Dr. Wells was his name, he was a dentist. He's the one that signed me up for it, and he said, Jack, we got something going on in our meeting, and we'd like for you to come. We need to talk to you. And I said, well, I will, Doc. And I did. I said, what do you want with me? He said, we got something we want to give you. I said, what's that? We want to give you the job as being the head of our honor guard. And I took it then, and I was head of the honor guard there up until about 3 years ago, that thing. And I got where I couldn't stand on my feet right and everything, you know. And it wasn't shortly after that a good friend of mine, who was a farmer, he was on the honor guard with me, and he helped me with it. If I couldn't get off, he would take it. And if he couldn't get off, I could. One of us could handle it back and forth. One thing I always remembered about that first honor guard that we had there, they were all World War I members. One fellow we had on there, his name was Rube Williams. He was Spanish-American War and World War I. And his actions and all were different than World War I guys were different than our World War II. And we were using rifles in our honor guard from Spanish-American War. 45-70 Craig rifles, barrels that much longer than old 3 Springfields. You know, we've got to try to get our car back down there, okay, and get on the road. And I've enjoyed doing this with you, and glad to.
Thank you. On behalf of the Hanashi Oral History Program and the Gulf Broke.
Yeah, and like I said, I'd love to have a copy of it, you know, if you don't mind.
Thank you very much.
Judy.